And we're on.
All right. We made it.
Yeah, but we have to wait for a commercial. From Sonic. Yum.
Sonic, Oreo, Dixon, cookie dough blast, and Sundae. Cookie E.
Let me see if I can get Twitch on here.
Okay. That's exciting. So we are on Twitch.
We are on Twitch. We've made it.
Facebook this week, but a little bit late. So welcome to anyone who will find us over here. We'll see what happens. But anyway, my guest this weekend up close is Adam Dow. And Adam Dow is a longtime UP company member, man about town, actor, writer, director, all sorts of things we'll talk about. And we're going to spend about an hour or so talking about improv and lots of things. So I guess to get us started, Adam, I'm wondering if you would share with our public how you got involved in improv. Like, when did you first see it? Why did you decide to do it?
Yeah, I think I saw my first improv show actually down at our theater at Unexpected Productions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in high school, Franklin High School. And I believe I started part of the improv club. I think with Paul Levy was running it. I don't know if I was in it at the time he was running it, but we got tickets to go down and I saw the first show and I was just completely hooked. It was so much fun. And I just was, after I saw the first show, I wanted to go see another one and another one. And that's pretty much what we did a lot of the weekends. And I remember back then, that's when they would have those big lines that go around the block. And that's when I started it at the Franklin. I was on the Franklin team. And then I just had such a good time. I think we got to the finals the year we did it. We did it 2 years. And then we did the finals and then we didn't win. But then I graduated from high school and I was just missing doing improv and the whole experience. Jeff Hogan was my first teacher, I think. Mm-hmm. And then I just really enjoyed the experience. And so I started the improv group with me and another guy, Ryan. What's Ryan's last name? I'll think of his name. But we started the improv group called The Collective, UW, and that I believe is still going today. I haven't been down there in a long time, but then we were doing that. And then I was also working at the theater with you guys. I was doing like lights and sound and doing some judging here and there and just watched lots and lots and lots and lots of improv.
Right.
And it became one of those things. When I was in college, I was like almost every day of the week, I was trying to either go see a show, be in a show, do some lights or sound for something. And I did that for like, I think maybe 5 years straight, just, yeah. And then I think that was kind of my first real dip into it, was doing it in high school in Franklin, which now I'm trying to run we did the Franklin tournament. We got Franklin in the tournament just this last year. This is pretty exciting because they've been out for like, I don't know, maybe 10 years. I think they've been out for.
Yeah, it's been a while. But that's kind of where everything started, because when Paul Levy is a company member, and Max Moore, who I actually think drove the kind of impetus behind it, wanted to do basically a theater sports match for Franklin High School. So I was brought in because I knew Max's dad, Todd Jefferson Moore, wonderful actor. And so I came in a couple of years and we did those projects. And then I think I did one of the first workshops at the Collective when you started that.
Yes, you did. I do remember that. Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but the only thing I really remember was we were in this like dumpy space, in some attic, weird closet. I don't know.
It was the old buildings at the UW.
Yeah. But it was like, wow, there's probably mummies in here somewhere. I'm not sure, but anyway. But we were doing improv, and and the Collective, picked up steam around that time, and shortly thereafter, and then.
We went up. I remember we went up to Bellingham and we played with the Dead Parrots, or they call themselves. I don't know if they were named the Dead Parrots at that time, but we had a great time going up, and then they came down and performed with us.
Right. Yeah, we did the first college improv festival, which had the Collective, Dead Parrots, and there was a school from Portland, somewhere in Oregon, came out, and then we also had, I think it was Evergreen State College had a team. We did a bunch of those.
That'd be an interesting group of improvisers there.
Right, basically everyone was stoned, I think.
Yeah. We brought vegan snacks.
Right, we went through a lot of chips. I'm not sure why. Anyway, cool. Yeah. And then you were working around doing tech and whatnot, and then you started getting on stage.
Yeah, and I think then I got into the I was an apprentice. That's back when we had the apprenticeship, I think.
Right. Well, you remaining apprentices.
Yeah, I think I got on the same time as Jill Purcell, and Dano, I think, was also there.
Right, Dano Beal.
Yeah. And so we were there, and then I did that for about a year, and then I finally got into the group, and
And what was it about those early days? Because you're like a high school, college kid's got a lot of stuff to do, a lot of other options. What was it about improv that really made you want to keep coming back, other than like a line around the block and want to be on stage? But for you personally, what were the challenges, the goals,
because I found it really just exhilarating, that the fact that it's all made up on the spot, the fact that you don't know what's going to happen next. I'd always been a big fan of storytelling, and I always wanted to make films, and used to make a lot of films when I was younger. And so it just seemed so liberating to get to meet with other people that are like-minded, and to be able to make up stuff, do the make-em-ups right there on the stage, and then that thrill, and then also just the thrill of experiencing something with an audience, and watching it all kind of come together. Sometimes it didn't come together. Sometimes the shows were, especially when you're starting off and learning. I remember the Collective, we did some pretty bad shows when we first started, but we also did some where just like, I can't remember ever laughing as hard, and that's the thing. It's like, it's that risk, I guess, the element of, this could really pay off. And, I've found some of the times when you find yourself laughing, it's the most genuine and hardest laughter I've had. Then, maybe you go see a stand-up comic or something like that, where it's funny, but I don't know, with improv, it's just stuff you can't, it's just all of a sudden comes together and something happens, and you're just like, you won't forget it,
Right. It's a lot about just being in the room, being in the moment, being there, whenever that happens. So, so as you grew as an improviser through UP, you mentioned, story being an important element to you. Regarding improv, were there particular forms, or, did you like long form? Do you like short form? What kind of?
I've had the most experience, I think, doing short form. I think that's the one I can't even know how many theater sports shows I've done now at this point in my life. So I've done a lot of short form, and I love long form. I think it's really fun, and when you see people that are really good at doing long form, it can be, amazing. And I would, that's something I always love to watch. I haven't done as much as I would like to. I would like to do more, in the future, but it's definitely, it's like it depends on also the kind of long form too, because you see like where it's a style or a genre, then you're really almost just doing it's like almost like a play, but you're making it up, And so that you have to kind of really know your craft, know your genre really well, to play the characters well and know the story. But then for, there's ones we do more of the loose, like the Herald and stuff like that, where it's like, you can come in and play with people and not have as many rules and set things that need to happen. So I like that ability to not have as many restrictions as well. It's kind of, they're both fun, and both have their disciplines that you need to have, to get good at them and have it be enjoyable to watch. Cool. Yeah.
And I know we want to talk about improv and filmmaking, which is something that you were doing, before you left. India, but I do want to talk about India next, and then we'll come back to the filmmaking. So, so what inspired you, and then how did improv happen there? Because you are one of the first people to take improv to India.
Yeah.
And it's now sparked a whole.
Yeah, it's a huge scene now. They had a TV show on it. There's groups in every city now. And like in Mumbai, where we started, we were the only group. Now there's like, I don't even know, God, there's so many groups it's hard to keep track of at this point. But yeah, I went there. Originally, I went to India because I had a good friend who I went to college with, a guy named Viraj, and we made films together. And he's actually a film cinematographer now, and he works in Bollywood as a DOP, they call it, director of photography. And he was, I wanted to travel abroad badly, and I had saved up some money. And he said, well, why don't you come to Bombay, because you can find work and everybody speaks English. And it was also a big entertainment hub. So I really wanted to be around where the arts and entertainment was happening and be in that scene. So it seemed like a good idea. And then when I was going to go, I actually got contacted by my friend worked at a company called Real Player. It's this old video player that's not even around anymore. But at one time, Real Player was like the main player that you'd use to play your content on your computer. And they had a website that they were interested in doing some blogs about video blogs about Bollywood. So I went and I said, well, we talked it out and struck a little deal. So I actually went there to shoot these little videos and, check out Bombay for a while. And then those videos actually grew into a much bigger project where they tied up with another girl that actually also worked for Real Player, but she was in India and she wanted to do a documentary. So it actually, the small little project turned into a full feature documentary film. And actually it was on Netflix for a little while. It's not there anymore. It was called Beyond Bollywood. And that film took us about 4 or 5 years to create. And we followed around the lives of these different people that worked in the film industry. So one was like a dancer. Another one was like this foreigner that was, backpacker that decided to act in films. Another one was like this makeup artist. And another was like a union boss. And he would go shut down the film sets and stuff. So we'd like follow him on set and like film all of this. And when I was there, I thought, this won't take very long. And I realized this is going to be a really big project. And because when I step in it pretty deep. So I got myself into it, and I realized, I needed another source to make some money, and 2, I just really missed doing improv. And the comedy scene there, the stand-up comedy scene was just starting to it was like this Western style comedy of stand-up comedy. And I was like, why doesn't anybody do this improv comedy theater? They have traditional theater. So we started going to these open mic nights and doing, I started teaching classes. I think actually you gave me my letter of recommendation, and I did my first class at a big college festival called Thespo at this theater called Prithvi Theater, which is really nice theater in Bombay. It's very famous. And that I got a newspaper article from that. And then that kind of got the door open for doing a lot more of these classes and shows. And then it just everybody was like, who's this foreigner here teaching this Western style comedy? And then I got featured in a magazine, Time Out magazine. And then that just kind of started to snowball. And it was cool because it also, the people that were performing with me were all people that worked in the Bollywood kind of film scene. So they were already, trained actors. They already knew how to, hold the stage, have good voice, so that made it really fun to see these really talented people get up and perform stuff that they were super excited about. It was something that was like brand new. Like it reminded me when I was back in high school, where it's something was so fresh and new, and this thing that you just found out about. And this is like, I can't believe you can do all this, And so that just was really exhilarating to be able to bring something to people that they didn't have before, and how excited and much fun people had when they started seeing the first improv shows. Yeah. And it was just, then that's just kind of grown from there. That's what it was, kind of the initial.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And I remember Real Player back in the day when I had to hand crank my computer to start it up.
Yeah.
And
you have to go on that online.
Yeah. The monitor was in black and white. Yeah. It was crazy. So in your experience, because a huge scene has blossomed there, and a lot of improvisers have come out of there, and I've come across a number of them who've come into my classes or I've talked to them. Is there a difference? I mean, you're a guy from the West bringing this idea to India, but is there just not only a cultural difference, but just a sense of humor difference, I guess, in terms of what works there that doesn't work here, or what works here and doesn't work there? Do you see those kinds of distinctions?
Yeah, I think, you get into, when you're talking about like humor, at least, or you're talking about, with humor, or just even watching any kind of content, you have your like local kind of humor that people get. You have your innuendo, your double meanings, then you have your like pop culture references that people talk about, and your cultural references, and you have a lot of like, and then you just have that basic universal humor, which like, would be like the fart joke or something, where everybody just kind of gets it. And I think that is when I started doing it over there, was a lot of learning, because you have to know those things about the culture or that place that you're performing in, right? If you're going to do, we're doing a show here in Seattle versus doing even a show down in, let's say, in New York, it's going to be a totally different audience, a different vibe and a feel, and what people know about. So, there's things that language I might use, and people are just like, I don't know what he's saying. I don't get it. And meanwhile, there's other times when people would, there's a lot of people change languages a lot, because there's so many different languages there. So people, speak, Hindi is the main language, but then people would, it's also in Maharashtra. So people would speak in Marathi, and then they would have Tamil as the southern language. So there's just people in that. There's a lot of regional humor. It was very popular. Like, we would do, for example, we do something we call time styles, right? And people there are like, "What's a style? I don't get it." Everything's Bollywood, right? And so what we changed it and became more of like, it would be different regional styles. So maybe you would do it like it was a Punjabi film, or maybe you would do it like it's a Gujarati film. And I found when performing there, I had to constantly be learning and reading and catching up. Like being able to speak in Hindi. If white guy speaks Hindi, it just works like gangbusters. People think it's hysterical. So, and just being able to know about pop culture, know about which Bollywood artists are popular, know about the films that are going on. And I think that's one of the big tricks about being able to kind of bridge that humor divide, because we have a lot of, like, even when we went to the festival, because we did get to go to a few festivals. We took the group, we did an improvised Bollywood show, and we went to Amsterdam, the Improv Festival there. We went to Toronto, and we went to Berlin with Gorillas, the group you taught. And then we came to Seattle. We performed at Unexpected Productions. And it was just interesting. I remember when we were in Amsterdam and watching all the different groups perform, and especially the first night where they would always go kind of, the humor would be like what people would stereotypically think about their culture. You know what I mean? So the Indian group had, oh, there's cows, right? And there's something to do with a cow. Or the Dutch group would, oh, there's a pot shop. We're at the pot shop right now, or something like that, right? Where it's all this stuff what people believe. But then, if you're actually performing for that audience, your own audience, it's much different,
Right.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, you did. And how I mean, clearly there's a scene, so there is an audience, but I'm just curious because, and again, maybe it's my cultural archetype, cliche, I guess. I just think, wow, there's so many people, there's so much to do in India. What kind of audience are you going to get? And, what is the appeal to an audience there when there's, again, in my mind, so much to do?
Yeah. It kind of, Bombay always kind of reminded me like LA. Like, I don't know if you've gone to many shows in LA, but you'll go to some of these things. The theaters are always really small. And a lot of times the audiences are not that big because, like you said, there's so much going on, right? So you could be like, I could see this theater show, or I could go see that guy that's in TV do a show, So it's kind of like you're kind of competing against that thing that's going on, and you kind of build an audience of your own. And I know a lot to do with the classes. So a lot of my people came to see the shows were people that were also taking the classes. I feel like with improv, it's kind of, people get really sucked in, and when they do it, then they're doing it all the time and going to all the shows. And what was that movie that came out? Don't Think Twice? The one with, yeah, I always thought that was a great representation of kind of like what these people that are kind of improv nerds kind of get really into it. But it's just such a great tool. I think also is like, it's a great place to network. It's a great place to build your storytelling and try out your acting chops. Also, great for being a writer. There's so many benefits I think you can get out of doing it. I always say everybody should take at least one improv class in their lifetime, to get the feel of it. So I would say performing there, I mean, I've done shows in front of 3,000 people, and then I've done shows for 2 people, so it's a whole, you run the whole gambit really, and who you're performing with, and the stage and the venue and the promotions. And learn a lot about promoting. That's definitely a big part of it. And I feel we're very lucky with what we have in Seattle, because we have our own home, and that's a big deal. Have a place where you can, put on your shows and have a place to basically live.
Right. So you never had a home theater in terms of your own space. You were always performing out of someone else's space, or comedy clubs, or.
Yeah. And those comedy clubs always were like, what's the numbers? How many people are you bringing in? We're going to review your numbers. So then it's really literally coming down, are you bringing in the audience or not? And then can't bring in the audience, the next guy's in up.
What have you done for us lately?
Yeah, exactly. Very much like that.
Yeah. What did you do last week? Okay, no.
Yeah, no. That was them. Yeah.
Wow. So is there something being from here that you took over there that just didn't fly, and you're not sure why? Like, it's interesting when you talk about doing styles. People are like, what's a style? Because it's so popular here in improv, and being able to do genre work. So was there some style of improv or some aspect of improv that you just kind of went, wow, nobody gets it, and I'm not sure why, but it's just not popular? Yeah.
I think when we first tried to do the Herald a couple of times, people are like, what is it I'm watching now? What's going on?
Well, that happens here.
Yeah. So this is supposed to be funny, or what am I watching? I think because when you did the short form, there's a guy that comes out and explains what's going to happen. Right. They sets it up, kind of sets the expectations and explains to the audience, gets them warmed up. And so that there's that whole participation part, which I really do love about the short form, because you're constantly going back to the audience, bringing the audience in. A lot of, not all long forms, but there are a lot of long forms where it's kind of like you get the suggestion from the beginning, and then at the rest of the show you're just watching and you're just experiencing it happen, versus being brought into it and being part of it, which is one of the great parts of doing live improv theater.
Right. And I mean, this might be a redundant question, but what's the appeal in India for people to come and see improv? Like what kind of magic does it present to them, or what kind of new thing does it present that they don't get in maybe other art forms?
Yeah. Well, like I think you actually said this, is that it's that immediacy. I think it's the one that's the most kind of what's happening right now, So if something happened, like you said, it's something happened in the news, or there's something that, even just outside the theater right before the show, all these kind of things affect that show, and you see it and be a part of that show. And that's, I think, is something you really don't find in a lot of other art forms, because, if it's a stage show, you've already rehearsed it, you've already, planned it out, everyone hits their cues, and the night goes well and everybody's fine. But, with improv, you don't know what's going to happen. So it's very reactionary to what's going on around you at that time, and that the audience and everything just changes the show to show. They're never the same show twice,
Cool. And for you, just in this, you can answer this as a performer or just as a person. What was it like? Did you feel like you got embraced and pulled into the culture, or were you kind of, there are places you go and you're always the outsider, you're always the person that's not completely there or accepted or.
Yeah, I think everybody feels this when they go abroad. I think even people that come here and live here go through the same kind of experiences. But where there are moments where you feel like you're totally accepted and you're part of it and you're really brought into the experience. And then there's other times where you're just like, hey, that guy looks different. He's and you're like, oh yeah, you're the foreigner. Yeah, the foreigner. Okay. Right. So I think and you definitely get, casted for specific roles because you look the way you look. And so I think there's different moments and different times and in the people that you're around. So definitely times where I felt like wow, I have done part of, I've had a few moments. I remember once where I felt like I'm in India now. I'm here. I've finally arrived. And I remember one was after we did an improv show and one of the sons of a famous Bollywood star wanted to perform a Bollywood dance, improvised Bollywood dance. And they put on the song and everybody was hooting and hollering and he did his whole dance thing and he performed it for me. So it's like, wow, how cool is that to have the son of a famous Bollywood star perform a Bollywood dance for you, Or I remember once we went on this a retreat and we were up in the mountains in the Himalayas and we were doing yoga. I'm like, in the bottom, this was like, that felt like, wow, this is such the Indian experience here. Can't get any more than this. And, and so those moments I felt like, wow, I'm really something that you don't just get just without being there for a while and experiencing it,
Right. And so you spent long periods of time in India teaching, establishing yourself, doing improv. And now you're doing a little bit, probably more frequently back and forth. Obviously, COVID exception, I guess.
Yeah, that was.
And you were actually in India when COVID kind of started.
Yeah,
you found your way back.
Yeah, I've been working there. I was working at a film school there, actually teaching improv to the acting department, and it's this school called Whistling Woods, and it's a really interesting film school made by this guy, filmmaker Subhash Ghai, and it's like basically kind of a lot of the more affluent kids would be sent from all over India. And it's really interesting because it's in the middle of this place they call Film City. And Film City is basically like a kind of like a jungle, but inside the jungle, they have all these sets where they'll have like all of a sudden one will look like you're in Switzerland, or one where there's a temple, or they'll be like, and they shoot all of these different filmings going there all the time. And in the middle of it is this film school. And so I was actually teaching for that film school during it. And then obviously the virus hit and everybody's like, oh, we'll just pause for a week. Okay, maybe 2 weeks. And then it's like, and then when we saw what was happening in Italy, I was like, this is not going to go away anytime soon. So I actually ended up having to cancel my classes, which everybody understood. And then I had to refund all the money, which was quite a bit of work. And then basically my friends were like, you need to go home like now because they're going to start closing the borders. And I was going to be like, okay, I'll leave in 5 days. And my friends were like, no, get out now because 5 days you may not be able to get out. And the day I left, the next day they shut the border. Oh. So it was pretty interesting to fly all the way back from Mumbai back to Seattle, right in the middle of all this. And everybody's just doesn't know what's happening and nervous and scared and very interesting.
Yeah, I was supposed to be going to Europe when the border got shut down. And I was still toying with it, like, I should go. I feel bad. I cancel. And then the government decided to shut the border. And if I had gone, I mean, I can't imagine. I might still be there. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of people got stuck. I mean, they just couldn't get home. So, right. And then a lot of the places they were just finally said, you got to get out. You can't be here anymore. And then you have to go home in some, flight that's specially arranged by the government, So I've heard a few people had to do that. So.
Right. And so you've been going back and forth, obviously with COVID, you've been here. I guess one more thing I'd like to discuss about the cultural difference is what shocks you now coming back to Seattle. I mean, having been here, grown up here, spent lots of time overseas, and then coming back, what's the thing that you kind of go, oh, this is why do we do this? Or this is weird. Or,
yeah. What are the things I would say? One is it kind of always first hits me is the amount of open space we have here. Like, it's just so weird. You can go walk out on a street and maybe not see somebody for a couple of blocks. You know what I mean? It's such a weird feeling to me, and the amount of space, I guess, because in Bombay it's like New York but triple the amount of people, you know, and it's all shoved into this little, you know, point, you know, and so everybody's kind of, you're constantly aware of other people's living around you at all times.
Right.
And you're constantly aware of other people's lives that are happening.
So you're always in someone else's circle.
And someone's always in your circle. So you're always having to like kind of negotiate, and you become, and in some ways it's kind of like, at first you're like, oh, this is intense, but it actually becomes very comforting to know that there's so many people around. Like, if you need help, there's always somebody there to help you. You have questions, someone's there to, you know, give you an answer. And people are just very helpful there. They'll, like, if you need, you know, moving something, doing something, someone's always going to pop out of nowhere and just like, oh, hey, I can, you know. And here it's kind of a lot like, you know, just barren. It just feels like, so, you know, I see why we make so many zombie movies over here, you know what I mean? Because it's just like, there's no, it's like these big open, kind of almost creepy to some extent. I think that's the big kind of part. And then it's interesting now because, like, I mean, in Bombay, there's definitely a, you know, a different divide in, you know, economic levels, right? So you have people that are just extremely wealthy, and then you also have people that are just incredibly poor. And it's interesting to see the people there that are poor. They're just like, they're just poor, you know, they just don't have money. Meanwhile, then you come back to Seattle, and it's the homeless population has completely changed and grown so much. And I get nervous around the homeless people here more than I would there. You know what I mean? Because there, this is like, it would be just like a family that lives out, you know, that are, you know, that don't have any money, right? Versus here, it's like, you know, a lot of times the people have things that have happened in their lives that make it so they can't or don't want to live in a location where they can be, you know.
Right. Some more sort of additional circumstances, you know, whatever it is. You know, whether it's money, addiction, whatever it is. Maybe more apparent here. I don't know.
Like, I would be I definitely am a lot more on edge here in Seattle in that way than I would be in Bombay. Like, Bombay, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, there's whatever. It's some poor people, it's fine.
Cool.
I'm like,
all right.
I would
let's shift back in time and through time and talk about improv and filmmaking. Because I know you're big on filmmaking, and I actually had the gift of being in a couple of your productions.
I know you were in some of my first films, Grandy.
We were talking about it before we came on, and I'm just like, wow, I'm gonna have to ask Adam. I haven't seen a lot of these in a while. I should check them out.
That was like one of my second film, I think, at that point. And you were hysterical in the film. You played this roommate, or no, the friend of the roommate, and you were like a movementist, and you were like you had your little black turtleneck on, and just took yourself very seriously. I thought you were one of the funniest parts in the movie, actually.
Right. Well, and that is me. That's me to this day. So I was just playing myself.
Well, you do a good job of it, Randy.
Those first films are really, and I remember, no offense, I remember showing up like your house or whatever. Oh, we're gonna shoot, and it's like show up, and then maybe something's gonna happen.
But that's classic filmmaking. It's hurry up and wait. You know, I mean, I worked in Bombay. I was, you know, got casted for a lot of parts in films, and you spent most of the time sitting around waiting for something to happen. And then when it's happened, no, you do it right now, do it. And then come on, back to sit.
Right. So what appeals to you about the use of improvisation in particular in filmmaking? Because you know, as you're saying, there's so much stuff that gets set up, and that's actually what kills time all the time. Like we have to spend 2 hours getting the lighting right. And so there's all this precision, and then you introduce this idea of improvisation to it. So for you, what's the appeal?
Well, I've actually only really worked with improvisers in my filmmaking career because I started, doing improv. And the thing I would love about working with an improviser is that I give them a script, but I don't worry about them sticking to the script, because I know if they can do the character, then they can bring out a lot of content that, in lines of dialogue that I would be way better than what I could actually, write. So I feel a lot of confidence when I'm working with somebody that's a strong improviser or an actor, and that they're also they know storytelling, right? Like a lot of times actors are more, they're trying to hit the emotions, hit their spots, but I think when you're an improviser, you have to have this part of you that is a storyteller, a part of you that is a writer, and so what your part is serving to the bigger picture of the, the film or the piece. And then
right, and so you then definitely see a difference between an improviser who can look at the big picture and kind of go, how does this fit into the overall story, versus an actor who's like, okay, here's my scene, here are my lines.
Yes.
And just try to answer that.
Direct me and mold me in the right way until I get the right spot. So, that's why when I feel like I'm working with a good actor or improviser, I know that what they're going to be capable of. And I don't feel like I even have to direct that much. I feel kind of, it's just like, we're just capturing the moment and letting them kind of express. And then they might even bring something out that I would not have even thought of, and then building on that and creating, and then it brings a lot more layers and textures to the performance and the story, which, you may not, when you originally put it together, you didn't think of it, but then when you start bringing it together, you're like, oh wait, this is this great extra moment or feeling that, we can really build on and create.
Right. And you mentioned, of working with improvisers, taking your script and then improvising from that. Do you use improv in the creation, in the writing at all? Do you ever like get people together and kind of go, hey, let's play around this idea and see what happens?
Yeah, I think that, I usually, when I do my writing, we have kind of a basic idea. Someone sits down and bangs out like a script, but then we usually just totally cut it up and change it all around, right? And that's usually a collaborative process with maybe 2 or 3 other people. And so then it's just kind of talking out the ideas and finding it, and then kind of from there, taking the different ideas and constructing them back together into something that has that overall arc, that you're trying to go for, and putting all these great scenes or ideas, and then just, that's the skeleton and the structure, and then putting those parts in there, and that's, the meat that hangs off of the skeleton of the thing. So I'm big, I'm very much into putting it all down, ripping it all up, blowing it up, putting it all back together, and keep doing it, because that's the whole artistic project. And that's actually what's the fun part of it is, going through that process and trusting the process and giving it this time and what it needs.
Is there anything that you feel is missing in the translation, so to speak, that there's a quality or something that you see improvisers doing live on stage, or you felt yourself as a performer live on stage that doesn't quite get to the screen, doesn't quite get on film? Something that you would strive for but have not captured yet.
Yeah, I think that there's always the improvised show. Is you're going to see a live show, and you've seen it so many times where people have tried to capture a show, even a theater play, and try to film it, and then like an actual show with the audience and stuff. And a lot of times I just do not see it work out very successfully. Sometimes it does, but even when it does work well, it's usually produced very heavily and very streamlined, so that because when it's on film, you don't have the space to kind of let the moments find your way around. While in the live theater, you can let those moments, you have a moment with an audience member, have a laugh, somebody says something, let that area to kind of let it kind of grow as a group, because it's live and that experience. And again, you just don't think you can capture that. Now, when you do improv in a movie or a film, I think a lot of that's spontaneity can be captured on camera. You can catch that moment, but it's not an improv performance to say. It's more of a improvised moment in a film. And a lot of, if you see a lot of these shows where they'll show top 10 improvised moments in films, and a lot of them were like the classic one with Harrison Ford, who was sick that day, didn't want to do the fight scene. So he just pulls out the gun and pretends to shoot the guy. And Steven Spielberg thought it was so brilliant, he just left it in. And it was just a made up moment right there. And so those things I think you can capture, but I don't, like you said, an improvised show where you do a performance and such, I think it's really hard to capture that, because that's the whole point of going to live theater, is to have that moment or have that experience. So why try to why try to capture it on film, or if you do, it's just a hard thing to do, I'd say.
Right. Is there a secret? We were talking about the controlled environment of, say, a film set, or you're shooting very confined parameters. How do you create space other than like, hey, improvisers, riff off the script? But how do you create an environment where people are able to sort of feel the sense of freedom to play with stuff, And that's actually, speaking from my own experience of working on some of your projects, that was actually one of my favorite parts. Was I felt like, well, I can just try stuff, and I'm gonna, maybe it's gonna end up in it, maybe it's not, I don't know. And we'll see what happens. But there was a certain sense of freedom of like, okay, I can, play around as long as I just stay in this space. And it was great also working with fellow improvisers. So it was a really fun. Those shoots were very fun because like-minded people, I think. But how as a director do you control that, where you've got this like controlled environment, but you want to have that sense of freedom and play within the environment?
Yeah, I think, you're trying to figure out what are we trying to convey, I guess, and what is the point that we're trying to get across in this part of the scene or the message, right? Because with each, like with storytelling, you're revealing and giving, you obviously want to keep your audience engaged, right? So you're always, if you want them to be like, well, what's going to happen next? And they're always kind of, if they're playing that game along with you and following along, then they're going to, be engaged and they're going to enjoy the story. So, as long as the characters know, or the actors know what they're trying to get across in the scene, so that it doesn't just go off into some weird world where it's not, we need to have this scene, information needs to be let out, and we need to understand this. Okay, then they know that, then the way it's let out can be different every time, and that can be it. And then if it gets too far off, then you have to have some structure, like you said, because if it's no structure, then trying to edit that together can be a big mess. It's a lot of work, because you can't, trying to put the two things together is, which I've done. I've worked on projects that are very like no scripting, and it can get really hard to try to put it together in the editing room.
Right. Well, that's a great environment for an improviser, because when we think about short form games or even long forms, that's what you're playing with. You're bumping against these rules that you're sort of trying to stay within within the parameters. It's not, hey, do anything you want, because then nothing happens.
Right.
So that's cool. So what are you working on? Where do you go? You're kind of between worlds.
Everything kind of got put on pause here in my life. Just had a bunch of family stuff happen, so I've been really busy with taking care of the family stuff. So I have dreams of going back to filmmaking and maybe even performing improv again here soon. I know that we're starting to do some small shows down at the theater. So that's a big jump too. I've done a couple of this whole performing on the Zoom and online. It's such a weird space now that we're doing, and we kind of have to do it out of necessity, but I think out of these kind of things is where real, things begin to evolve, and new ways of looking and stuff. When you don't have that ability anymore, you now have to grow and change the way you thought you never would. And so for me, I want to get back to, I want to make some films again. That's what I really want to do. I've been, saving up money. I've been buying equipment. Been wanting to get back into it, and I have a couple of script ideas, and then getting back into performing. I don't know when I'm going to be able to go back to India, because everything's still kind of locked down for a while. So I think mainly when, the vaccine comes out again, or comes out, and all can get it, then maybe we can think about traveling again. But
Right.
yeah, so I think as the world gets better, then more projects will start to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I guess since you brought it up, the thing about doing Zoom improv, which I've done more than I care to talk about. But I'm also curious from a filmmaker standpoint, what's working and what's not working in terms of Zoom. And I've spent a lot of time watching lots of shows, parts of shows, and kind of going, oh, well, that's kind of cool. But I haven't really thought about it looking at it with a sort of filmmaker's eye. Like, how can we make it better? Or what do we focus on? Or what's working, what's not working?
Yeah. I mean, I always like the elements of being able to, because we are working in film, now you have that ability to shoot stuff and have it intertwine with what you're doing. And I think it's also the nature of what we do. It's like, how much improv do you want? How much is the ability to have something that's, put together? If the heart of it is there, the heart of the improvised, concept is there, when is it, and it just becomes how much you want to stay true to that, and I know, like Unexpected Productions, we've stayed very true to having that improvised part of all of our shows. But I do like the ability to, maybe shoot a small film, have something that you've put together and put on there, and then have it interspiced with the stuff. But I've seen some of the stuff be enjoyable, and I think there's some of the games. It's hard because I think for a lot of people, like for me, I'm on the computer all day long working, and so then to be like, okay, here's your free time, get back on the computer. You're like, oh man.
Right.
That was why going to the theater was always like the stress buster, because that's where you got to, not be in front of the computer. You got to move around.
Right. That's why you need two computers, so you can be like, oh, I'm at work. Oh, wait a minute, I'm gonna go play over here.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Totally different. Let me crank up the real player.
Yeah. But it's amazing now that we have the technology is at this level. I mean, the fact that we're streaming this live right now could have done this 10 years ago. I mean, imagine if we had gone through this pandemic then. I mean, I don't know, we wouldn't be able to even talk like we're talking right now.
Right. We would have just all died because there's nothing to do.
God, imagine what they did back in 1918 when they had the Spanish flu.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Just listen to a lot of radio.
Well, it's also funny because, and this is a stretch, but it's funny you bring out, like turn of the century and stuff like that. And one of my little hobbies, I guess, is tracking how improv fit in the world way back when. And, I mean, one of the big things that we've lost, it's kind of come back a little bit, were classical composers who part of their concert was they would improvise. And oftentimes, and Mozart and Beethoven and all, and they would just do this stuff. And I just thought, wow, where is that? How has that translated into what we're doing now? And with all this amazing tech that we have that you just were talking about, the fact that we can do it.
Yeah.
And you and I are talking, and but you could be in India. Right.
And that's changed a lot, because I mean, imagine now when we do these live shows, even your classes. I mean, now you're having people attend your classes that are in India, which you would never have had before, Yeah. So I think that's a big, game changer right there, in some sense, because now you're definitely, the whole world is kind of on the same field at that point, because you can be anywhere. I mean, just other than the time zone difference is the big thing.
Yeah. And that's something I think at UP in particular, we're trying to embrace, which is trying to branch out and kind of go, hey, we can appeal to a bunch of people around the world who can't normally come and take our class. They can't spend 8 weeks in Seattle or whatever. So let's reach out to them online. And, and it's been somewhat successful. But it's also just interesting because obviously it's not an original idea. So there are a bunch of teachers and theaters and improv theaters in particular that are reaching out and trying to do this. And so, yeah, it's been really interesting to find out also from the students I've had from other countries, just what their influences are. So
Yeah.
so in term, I know obviously you were trained at UP.
Mm.
You kind of you grew up in UP.
Yeah.
You were
Definitely
adopted.
Yeah.
You were adopted. We took
Yeah.
you in, swaddling clothes,
I think I was
into
17,
UP.
16.
But I am curious, just in terms of your growth as an improviser, what would you say are the top, say, 3 big influences in terms of whether it's a book, whether it's an idea, whether it's a show, but just stuff that you like when you're teaching elsewhere, or formulating ideas for shows or films, that you kind of keep coming back to, right? Yeah, that's what it's about. You've talked a lot about story, which is awesome in my music to my ears. But what other stuff?
I would say, what are the big, I mean, just for as far as an artist in general, not just improv, you're saying, or
Yeah.
Well, I would say, I mean, there's definitely films that I've saw where I'm like, wow, this is really inspirational, and I've really thought this is really well put together. I was just talking about Sunset Boulevard the other day. I love that film. And I was, when you see really good storytelling and where you just really get caught up into the narrative that you're not thinking about how the mechanics work.
Right.
And that feeling, I think, is when I really get that rush of adrenaline. I think that's a big part of it. And I mean, I've had a lot of great performers I've worked with. I mean, I've got to work with you. I've gotten to work with everybody at the theater. Has been amazing and inspirational. I've gotten to also work with, people that work in the film industry that have, been around for years and gotten experiences with them and hear their stories and how they've lived their lives. And so I think it's, we kind of, you stand on the shoulders of the people that got you there, So there's a lot of that, I think, that is kind of, I find inspirational. And seeing their work also, I think seeing other people that I think, wow, this person's really good, inspires me to also want to do work really hard and do good. Because, I mean, it's not a competition, right? At the end of the day, you're competing with yourself. So it's really that ability to go back and say, well, how do I do that? How do I find those things in myself? And then books, I remember, what was the first one the one you made us read it? I think Truth and Comedy is a classic for improv books. I think that was one of the big ones where I'm like, oh wait, this stuff actually makes sense to what we're doing on stage, and you actually could take that information. Now there's so many books out there. It's hard to keep up with all the improv books. And then I think also when I started doing improv I started doing a lot more corporate training stuff when I was over in Bombay. And then being able to have to kind of explain, that part of being a teacher. And then you got to see, well, oh, wait, this has so many different uses and abilities that you can take this art form and use it in so many different ways that really opens up. So I found that actually kind of inspiring when I go back to do my work, is what is the deeper meaning of these things that we're trying to do and bring across. And then also teaching, I find that very inspiring. I think that it's seeing someone growth that occurs from when they start to when you see them in 5 years, and like, wow, they got really good, and seeing that I always find is a big inspiration as well, I think. And then that ability to laugh with people that you like really hard. That's like really hard. I don't know, when you have those moments where you just can't stop laughing, and I've just had so many fun experiences like that in improv scene when it's a good show. It feels, you get that. I'd say those are the things that kind of inspire me, at least, to keep going and doing it.
Yeah. Well, and those moments are just that. They're moments, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And you're laughing so hard, but then that's it.
And then you try to explain it later and you can't.
Right. Or relive it and kind of go, well, what? Why was
it so funny?
Definitely happens. Well, and it's also amazing. I guess what I'm inspired by what you're saying is, and I'm sure you've had this, where people will come up and talk to you about stuff you did. And it's like the one show they saw and it was really memorable, and they remember that moment that you had in that show. And I'm always like, I can't remember yesterday's show, let alone, so I just kind of nod my head and go, oh yeah, yeah, that was great. But I am often floored by the fact that they remember it, that years later they'll come back and go, oh, and you were in the scene and you did this and you said this, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, that must have been really great. And those kind of in the moment moments that you end up with. Is there a type of improv or kind of improv, not even necessarily a form, can be a form, but more of a feeling for improv that you aspire to, that you haven't touched yet, so the idea of going, if I could do this kind of improv, that would be a really great thing to do. I haven't seen it, haven't done it, haven't achieved it yet. Do you have anything like that?
I feel like I've done a lot of theater sports in my life, that's for sure. And it's definitely a kind of format. You kind of, sometimes when you do a lot of it, you kind of feel like you get stuck, where you kind of, I feel like I've done the scene a bazillion times, right? So I would, for me personally, I would like to find experiences and chances to maybe do stuff where it's like, oh, this is real. You feel like you're doing real theater, but it's still improvised, but you're like, now I'm actually trying to, flex my acting chops, or I'm really flexing, because like with short form, you're just kind of in a character for a moment. Sometimes the characters can come off, cartoony as a view. So I really would like to have and work more on that and that experience. And, really a lot of it is just, I wish I had time to go take an acting class and go take but I wish I could take thousands of classes I wish I could take. So, but I think being able to maybe do some other shows that were not just as short form comedy related, but right now I'd be down to just do any shows these days because there's nothing happening.
Right. You'll improvise for food.
Yeah. You're gonna be starving quick. That was the big part. And it was the hardest thing because when I went to India, it was like, people thought that you make money doing improv. I'm like, I don't. And it's the hardest part to explain. Well, I mean, comedians can make money doing stand-up comedy, but it's like, how do you, you're doing one show and you're splitting it with like, let's say 5 or 6 people. And so it was just a lot of, that first part was like, well, people were talking about literally when we first started teaching, it was like, well, I'm going to quit my job and do improv. And it's like, it doesn't work. You can't just do that. So it's like, there's not even, everybody kind of makes their money around, like we all make our money around improv, but you're not like, oh, I just do improv shows and that's what pays my bills,
Right.
So,
no, absolutely. And you have to kind of embrace it. I have students all the time who are like, wow, Randy, you've been around forever and maybe too long. And, how do you make your living doing improv? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, there was no plan. It just sort of happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of plans, I guess the last question I have for you is, because your life is in limbo, like you can't go back to India right now, go back to teaching film school, doing all that stuff. So I guess the easiest way to put it would be, what are you doing? But two, like how does it go day to day when you kind of, in a way, I would imagine, have stuff kind of up in the air? Where it's like, oh, am I going to go back? Can I go back? Or have you kind of settled, like, oh, I'm going to be here for a while, and that's just the way it is?
I think I am going to be here for a little while. I think I'm going to be in Seattle. I've got my family. I have 2 elderly folks. I don't think they would like to be called elderly, but they are. So I definitely, this whole thing, they've been needing a lot of help, and we have like a small family business that also needed a lot of help because the pandemic has, changed things quite a bit.
Right.
So that's totally, I've totally changed my focus right now. But it's fine. Sometimes things take pauses, but they don't go away. Sometimes you need to shuffle your life around to work through stuff. And the art form's not going anywhere. That's the way I always look at it. India's not going anywhere. It's there, and you can always go see it. So I just think that, right now I kind of have to change, evolve, I guess, and move. And I think that when I get the chance to come back to what I've done before, I'm going to value it so much more and be so appreciative to get those chances again.
Right. So you're here, you have a life in India as well. Is there some other part of the world that you would like to explore or be?
I would love to. I've never been to South America. That's one of the places that's still on my bucket list. I would love to go down to South America. I was lucky enough to go to Africa. I've been to Europe, been to a lot around Asia. That was the reason I've been single so long, is I wanted to travel so much, and I really enjoy that. That's been a big passion of mine. Is also, filmmaking and traveling is a big part of it. So I want to see as much as I can around the planet when I can. So one of on my current bucket list is I want to go to Machu Picchu. That's where I would love to go and check that out. I've watched a lot of documentaries about it. And I don't think we're going to get a chance after some time. They're just going to probably not let people go eventually. So, and I wanted to go to Nepal. I've gone there so many times. I was going to go to Nepal and I just haven't gotten a chance to go. So that's another place I'd like to go.
Right.
And I would take a ticket to anywhere, I guess, right now if I could.
Right. You can go to Portland.
Yeah, there you go. Portland's pretty happening. It's like here, but it's the exotic world of Portland.
Right, you can buy a book. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, well, thank you, Adam. I know we're running a bit late because we started a bit late, but and last thing I'll say, which is kind of weird, is you've got some gray in your beard.
Yeah, I know, huh?
Considering I've known you since you were in high school.
Yeah,
I haven't changed. As far as I can tell, I haven't changed.
No, you look just the same. Not better. Yeah, it's starting to come in. The pepper.
I know. I'm like, wow, I'm talking to an adult.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
my hairline's going back. My gray's coming in. So, father time.
Right. Don't look back.
Yeah.
So, anyway, hopefully we'll have you down to do one of our shows.
Yeah.
Sometime soon. We are doing shows at the theater. Wednesday we have duos. Friday we have theater sports coming up, and Saturdays we have Fact or Fiction, which is an online show about storytelling and improv. Check that out. We have we're right between quarters, but our next quarter I think starts next week, if I'm not mistaken. And we also have special classes and other stuff that's happening, and yeah, everything's available for perusal at unexpectedproductions.org. And big thanks to Adam Dow for being the guest this week.
Thank you, Randy. It was fun talking.
Yeah.
Haven't caught up in a while, so it was good to get to chat.
Yeah, cool. All right.
All right.
I'm gonna try to get us off so that we can then really talk.
Okay.
But we'll see what happens. So here we go. See you guys later.